get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely
Right.
stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship,
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
and no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, this is the latest from the GB Newsroom. A call has been made for a special summit to bring an end to the toxic rail dispute. RMT union boss Mick Lynch has written to the government calling for a meeting with an independent chair, if necessary, to end what he's described as chaos on the railways. It comes as passengers face another day of disruption, with workers again joining the picket lines. More strikes are set to be held on the 31st of May and the 3rd of June. That's the day of the FA Cup final at Wembley. Protesters have been demonstrating against the proposed ULEZ expansion plan. Motorists were beeping their horns in support of the protesters in Orpington today. The mayor's proposal to expand the ultra-low emission zone could potentially reach the Kent border by August. Some outer London boroughs, along with Surrey County Council, launched legal action in February over the proposed extension. Protesters say it'll harm them financially. The Labour leader says he's ready for a dirty and nasty campaign ahead of next year's general election. Sir Keir Starmer used a speech at the Progressive Britain conference to outline his vision for the party, which involves changing the entire culture. He also admitted more work needs to be done to reconnect with working people. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has asked Pope Francis to back Kyiv's peace plan. The pair met in Rome to discuss a peace mission to end the war with Russia. The Ukrainian president earlier held talks with Italian government officials as well, including Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and the Italian President Sergio Mattarella. It's his first trip to Italy since Moscow invaded Ukraine in February last year. A nurse from Devon has won a £200,000 prize for her work in improving diabetes care. Margaret Shepherd from Exeter was chosen from over 50,000 medical colleagues across the globe. The 60-year-old won the Astor Guardian's Global Nursing Award for raising awareness of the condition. She's set up a network of genetic diabetes nurses and has become the leading nurse for monogenic diabetes in the UK. Special behind-the-scenes footage has been released from the King's coronation. The Prince and Princess of Wales have published a 5-minute video on their official YouTube channel, including footage of them in their coronation robes before being taken to Westminster Abbey. Royal fans also have the chance to see Prince Louis and Princess Charlotte preparing to leave home at Kensington Palace on the morning of the service. And the Eurovision Song Contest final began earlier this evening in Liverpool, and it got started with a special surprise. The Princess of Wales made a special appearance playing the piano in a pre-recorded opening video featuring last year's winners, Kalush Orchestra. They were also joined by 2022 runner-up Sam Ryder playing the guitar on the top of the Liver building with Andrew Lloyd Webber on the piano. Liverpool's been hosting this year on behalf of Ukraine, who won last year's contest. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's time for Headliners.
Thank you, Tatiana. Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. A rare appearance on a weekend night. I'm here with Douglas Murray fanboy Leo Kearse and Queen of the Boat World, I'm assured, Cressida Wetton. I have no idea, but I assume that's some kind of slur, possibly just a pun on your name, I don't know, or have you actually come in from the yacht?
I'm a boat dweller. I live on a narrow boat.
Oh, you literally live on one?
I literally live on one.
Not because we're actually based in Paddington Basin, though I don't know if you're allowed to say that.
That's not why.
She drove her boat here.
Did you?
I did.
She's like Kevin Costner in Waterworld.
Does he get asked every day?
Happy Valley, where the horrific killing in the last episode, that's on the waterways, isn't it?
Is it?
There's
How
a dark
lovely.
side to the waterways, Cressida.
There certainly is.
You'll find out in due course. Anyway, let's have a look at the front pages for tomorrow, which I believe is Sunday, isn't it? God, I've never done this before. The Mail on Sunday, Kate's Eurovision tribute to Ukraine. There is the Princess of Wales there. The Sunday Telegraph, Labour to give EU citizens the right to vote. They will have to win the election first. Sunday Mirror, I'm a celeb, saved me from cancer. An unexpected twist. The Sunday Times, nursing union chief in U-turn over pay deal. That may be the dullest headline of the night. Sunday Express, Rishi's vow, I won't budge. And there is Kate there again, looking splendid with her shoulder exposed. And finally, the Daily Star Sunday. The Daily Star Sunday, yeah, I guess that makes sort of sense. Wacky X Factor star Wagner, or possibly Wagner, I'm going to make a fortune flogging pics of myself playing bongos in Buff. It's extraordinary what they can get away with at the weekend. Those were your front pages. So, unappealing though most of them were, let's have a look at those front pages in more detail. We kick off with the Sunday Telegraph, Leo.
So the Telegraph leads with Keir Starmer's plot to give millions of EU nationals living in Britain the vote. So he's been accused of wanting to rig general elections by letting migrants who live in the UK and pay tax have a say. So there's 3.4 million EU nationals in Britain who already fulfil the requirements to be settled. They've got settled status. There are further 2.6 million who've been granted pre-settled status, and obviously that's a huge block. That's 6 million people. So if they're more likely to vote Labour.
I was going to say, you use the word block, and that does imply like a uniform voting intention or direction or whatever. Would we assume that they are all left-wing?
I think people, immigrants to the UK, I mean, this is why left-wing parties tend to be really big on immigration, because they know that those people, once they come here and get settled, will generally vote for left-wing parties. So, I mean, for example, Muslims, certainly under Jeremy Corbyn, 85% of British Muslims voted Labour, which is a huge
That is definitely
bias.
a block. It is interesting, though. I'm not sure this will happen here. Of course, in America, the Democrats were accused of being deliberately encouraging southern border immigration for exactly that reason, not paying attention to the fact that once settled in America, people from traditionally Catholic countries quite often become quite sort of traditional and
so you think they won't remember and think, oh, he was good to us, we'll vote for him next time.
People have very short memories.
Get in and change their mind.
Do you have children? You'll know how short memories people can be.
No, I think they should give the vote to pets, you know, not do the next move.
If my Turkish barber has taught me anything, it's that immigrants to the country then are quite resistant to further waves of immigration.
Yeah, absolutely. Love a Turkish barber. Has he got a picture of Ataturk up?
No,
you've got it. They're the best ones. Anyway, it'll be very interesting, because, of course, there was a massive controversy in 2016 as to whether or not EU citizens should have that vote as well, the Brexit vote itself.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem fair. If you're living here, paying tax and stuff. More worrying are Labour's plans to expand the franchise to include 16 and 7-year-olds as voters. Because the younger people get, the more idiotic they are. And they're obviously vastly more likely to vote for whatever communist hellhole they think will deliver utopia for them.
We were talking about this earlier when we just, in the context, you know, of more sort of like long-term political, how to sort of steer the boat or whatever. And the problem with young people is that they have yet to absorb that Scrutonian proposition that it takes centuries to build things up and it can take moments to destroy them and then you've got to build them up again. But when you're young, you're not interested in planting acorns. You're not interested in tending to oak trees. You want to see change.
I'm fascinated that you think there's only one problem with young people.
Yes,
that's very generous of you.
Links Africa is the other problem.
Yes.
Anyway, let's have a look at the Sunday Express, Cressida.
OK, Sunak tells Archbishop he will house migrants in barges as he stands up to Tory rebels. Now, obviously, I've got a bone here. You shouldn't be housing anybody in a barge. That's a narrowboat joke.
Including you.
Including me. Come on, Sunak, what do you think about housing?
Literally have room to swing a cat?
Swing a cat. If I could put a single migrant up on my sofa bed and it would be...
You shouldn't swing a cat at a migrant. That is definitely a hate crime.
Try to avoid that. But yeah, it's compact and bijou. But anyway, Sunak, he wants to stick to his 5 pledges, doesn't he? Things aren't looking good for him in general. I can't imagine he's going to get in next time. But he's dismissed the criticism from the Archbishop and he plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda and get the barges out anyway. He's standing with that.
I mean, my personal feeling about, on the one hand, I think the Tory plans to slow down the small boats have proved, obviously, to be incredibly ineffective over a sequence of years. They are bizarre, arcane, gothic, and seem to be begging for obvious criticism. But on the other hand, I don't think it's any business of the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Rishi should be a hard man about this. He should come out and say, like, listen, all right, Archbishop, you want lots of small boat crossings? You've got Lambeth Palace. We're putting 100 in Lambeth Palace. We're doing that tomorrow. And he could do that. He could do that. He's the Prime Minister. I don't know. And what's the Archbishop of Canterbury going to do? Like, you know, turn around and be like, oh, no, not in my backyard.
He needs a new Thomas Cromwell, doesn't he? It's Wolf Hall, basically, him versus Sir Thomas More or whoever it was. You know, that's when you've got to get the state versus the church. It is an opportunity to really rev that up again.
Yeah, I think people like the Archbishop, people like Gary Lineker, people who say, you know, they want a virtue signal by saying, we should have all the small boat crossings.
We do know Gary Lineker put up a migrant, admittedly a PhD student at Oxford University for a long weekend.
From Oxford University.
Late into the night with the Chianti discussing quantum mechanics with them.
You're getting a grooming gang. You're getting some Albanian crack dealers. That's who you're getting, Gary.
I just wish the Tories would actually come up with a plan that would work as well as, you know, require defending from the predator. I don't know. Is there anything they can do at this point that will convince people that they have it?
Australia made it work.
Oh, I thought you meant send them to Australia. I was going to say, like, Magwitch.
We've done that. We've tried it. It works, but not again.
Well, they're the hulks. They're going to put them back on, aren't they? It could be like, I don't know, Great Expectations. That proved to be a disappointment, didn't it? If that had worked, that could have been it. Anyway, Sunday Times now, Leo, I think. Is that right next?
Yeah, so the Sunday Times is leading with Pat Cullen, who's the head of the Royal College of Nursing Union, or the General Secretary. It sounds quite communist, doesn't it?
Yeah.
She'd originally recommended that the nurses accept the government's offer, and now they've voted to reject the offer by 54% to 46%, which is definitely democracy in action. And so they're now preparing a ballot on whether to strike again. Originally, the Royal College of Nurses wanted a 19% pay rise, which seems pretty outlandish.
That's a hell of an opening proposition.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I suppose if you're going to start somewhere... I mean, to be fair, if we all had an option, I suppose, not all of us are very easily unionised. This is the problem, isn't it? But, you know, inflation has been over 10% for much of this year, so anything less than that is going to amount to a pay cut. But on the other hand, we all know how it goes. But I do sort of understand the nurses being fed up because they were getting patronised like nobody's business during the COVID pandemic, weren't they? Standing outside, banging saucepans together as if they were sparrows or something.
Yeah, all that money they should have got went to saucepan repair.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And small boys with trumpets. But I don't know. I don't like the sound of the Royal College of Nursing either. It's like the College of Policing. All these colleges, they're like they're undercover... They are dissolving our national unity. The Sunday Times, we've done that one. Finally, we have the Mail on Sunday, Cressida, with the Eurovision.
Kate and her fabulous shoulder. So she's played the piano at the Eurovision tribute to the Ukraine.
Oh, she actually played the piano there?
Well, not. I don't think it was at the event, was it? I think she recorded it.
Yeah.
I hate to say, I think she may have used the keyboard demo button. I don't know if you heard the clip. I remember doing that.
That looks like a very proper piano. It's gone now, but it's a proper piano. It wasn't like wasn't an electric one, I don't think. There she is.
Well, no. So I'm sure she can play the piano. So that's lovely, isn't it? She always looks stunning. Powerful statement of solidarity.
Yeah, she's got great shoulders. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, she does have great shoulders. Sounds like we're discussing a MMA fighter.
Or maybe a racehorse. She was obviously given a decent education. They obviously knew she was going to be a princess one day. She's been trained in how to bear a shoulder and play a sonata.
Yeah.
These are modern-day accomplishments, which all too many women come onto the market without having that.
Yeah. And she gave a tribute to Ukraine, which, with obviously Zelensky wasn't allowed to speak at Eurovision. But then, I don't know if speaking at Eurovision would be the right place for him to speak.
There was genuine discussion about that in serious commentary, in serious columns, like in the monthlies and the glossy weeklies, about whether or not it would be appropriate for Zelensky to use this as a propaganda platform.
Perhaps they could have the Archbishop at the Well, he likes speaking, doesn't he? It would suit him. It would be a nice big platform.
But it's difficult for him because, of course, the Ukrainian refugees are the ones that many of the left wing say, oh, it's all right when you want the Ukrainian refugees, so that just means you're a racist.
No,
very thorny issues.
Culturally similar, also they're women and children.
They are culturally similar. They're extreme right-wing. That's perfect. Anyway, those are your front pages. Join us after the break. We have Starmer's lurch to the right. Not one but two daring RAF missions, one past, one present, and our first dose of trans wibble for the night. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. I've got Leo Kearse and Cressida Wetton in the hole. So, new Labour to kick off this section. Leo, in The Independent, Keir Starmer claims to be on steroids. He could have fooled me. I have to say. So surely a little bit more jaw definition would be a start, wouldn't it?
Well, Sir Keir Starmer, certainly some aggression, maybe, and some willing to fight. But Sir Keir Starmer said he does not care if people think he is Conservative, as he promised the next government will be New Labour on steroids. So, I mean, it's interesting that, you know, the Conservative government have sort of drifted to the left, and everybody who voted Conservative is now upset they didn't get a Conservative government. Now everybody who votes Labour isn't going to get a Labour government. It looks like the Labour government is going to be a Conservative government.
There is going to be no clear blue water between these parties, is there? But in a year's time, they are going to be just like cheek by jowl. It's going to be a ridiculously choiceless choice.
Yeah, it's really going to be, you're just, you know, voting for optics, voting for a different face. But yeah, in a blast to critics who say he's too right-wing, he said that Labour must understand precious parts of Britain's way of life, communities and environment are worth saving.
He's talking about you and your bard.
Do you think, I've covered. He says that in one breath, but he's also saying this is about rolling up our sleeves, changing our entire culture, our DNA. Do you want to keep it the same, or do you want to change it? What are you up to, Kit? I think he's just treading water.
Man, isn't he? He is a classic wind sniffer. I think it bizarre. I've not got much time for Sunak, but Sunak, I think, has got a little bit of a clearer idea of what he actually wants to do. Although maybe you get a sense of that once you've got your hands on the reins.
And also, Sunak's actually doing well. I mean, the problem is that, you know, I think after 15 years in government, people are just ready for a change. But, you know, if Sunak had had a longer run at it, he'd have more of a chance. But the reality of what Labour are actually going to do is raising taxes on private schools, taking the railways into public ownership. So it's very much a sort of old Labour. And some of these ideas, like raising taxes on public schools, it'll raise £1.6 billion of tax. You might think that's great. It's actually going to cost £4 billion in tax because people are going to pull their kids out of private schools and put them in the state schools, which costs us money.
If we could have a serious conversation about private sector, state schooling, grammar schools and so on, and get it down... There's a woman called Merrin Somerset Webb, who's a sort of Financial Times columnist and so on, who I happen to know and had this conversation. There's all sorts of interesting ideas that have been trialled around the world to do with vouchers, where basically if you've got a child, it costs roughly £6,000 a year to educate your child. It changes, obviously, as you go through the system. If you were given that £6,000 as a voucher, and then there were a number of schools competing for your business, offering different... Because, like, private school costs you about £20,000 a year, on average, something like that. But state school, if you can't afford private school, you take your kid out, then you're costing the state... Do you know what I mean? It's like absurd.
And that's how China moved into a free market economy, by allowing the factories to compete in the free market, you know, once they'd finished their communist quota.
Which is exactly who will be in the private schools, of course, because British parents won't be able to afford them any. Asylum news now in the Telegraph, Cressida, and the latest plans to house refugees could well burst the dam of goodwill in certain quarters.
Al Murray and Dan Buster's historian blast appalling plan to house migrants at RAF Scampton. So about 80 years ago, in fact, almost 80 years to the day, the amazing Dan Buster's what's the word? I don't know what the occasion happened. And at this site, there's now plans for this historic site to house migrants.
How familiar are you with the Dam Busters?
Not very familiar. I have been on Wikipedia
working your way
today.
around it.
Well, it looked very impressive. I have to say, I didn't know that Al Murray was that interested in Second World War history.
Oh, yeah, no, he's a
but I'll have
that's
a
his main job now. Pub landlord he does at weekends if he's got time to fit it in. But We Have Ways is one of the country's top podcasts,
Well, I did like Second World War history at school, so I'll have a listen.
And James Holland, who is his sidekick, who is the Dan Busters historian, is the brother of Tom Holland, who's probably the country's best historian at the moment. They're an amazing kind of historian family.
Well,
Tom Holland does the podcast The Rest is History with Dominic Sandbrook, who's also brilliant. So if you want to know about history, the Holland boys have just got the whole thing sewn up. They're like the Cray twins of history podcasts.
Getting back to the story. I mean, they're saying, we can't have these immigrants on this RAF base because it's going to be terrible for the base. It's going to, you know... What do you think it's going to do to the villages? They're going to be... If you dump 700, some of the villages will have a population of like 400 people, and they put 700 people in the village. These people who come across in small boats, and it's like, you know, these aren't people who've been cherry-picked that are doctors and nurses and stuff. It's just anybody who can get on something that floats and comes across
And when
the channel.
people talk about, like, it's a few hundred here or there, there's this image that they're sort of dispersed like a fine mist across the country. No, they tend to land in a... I mean, it's like that... you've probably seen that footage from... I can't remember the name of the particular sort of political unit within South Chicago.
Yeah.
But the black community there are just complaining that the immigrants coming in... Because it's activated them, it's galvanised them, and so they're giving voice to their anger.
Yeah.
This is what happens just occasionally, as with this example. It hits somebody who can find their voice. But most of the time, these people never have a voice. You never hear from them.
Absolutely. We saw it in Liverpool. We've seen in other working-class communities, which is where they get put. I mean, I don't understand why we've got the technology to identify places where Guardian readers, you know, Labour voters, Liberals who want open borders migration live. Put the cross-channel migrants there, and then let people who have these opinions deal with the consequences of these opinions.
Anyway, I do wish the best for RAF Scampton, which apparently was in line to get some kind of huge sum of money in order to convert it.
Well, this is the thing, they keep being told they're going to be part of the levelling up plan, and then it doesn't happen.
No,
and so
they were going to become like a centre of aeronautical excellence, instead of which they're going to become like a... the second two-star hotel full of unemployable,
Diversity is strength. They're going to become very strong.
Staying with the Telegraph, Leo, and it sounds like things very nearly got exciting in the Sudan recently.
Yeah, so Rishi Sunak was within hours of sending British paratroopers into Sudan, which would have been the biggest British parachute drop on operation since the Suez Crisis of 1956, which actually wasn't that far away from Sudan.
No, but certainly not in the dictionary.
Yeah. So it's to secure a second evacuation point during the Sudan emergency, but I guess they got everybody out. And
I don't know what the parachuters would have done, though. You can't parachute people down and then parachute back up with them.
No, you can't. This is a fascinating example of gender pay gap stuff to me, because apparently these guys get paid more. Well, so they should. Have you read what they actually do? Paratroopers smash the ground and are dragged along until the parachute loses enough air to enable the friction of the body against the ground to bring the soldier to a stop.
Oh, my God.
I'm so glad it didn't happen. Isn't that horrible?
You have to learn how to jump.
Layers of epidermis have gone.
Oh, can you imagine? I don't...
You have to keep your ankles together when you drop. It's like falling
from
a 10-foot wall.
I thought that was just general advice.
Yeah,
right.
That's why that's also... so you don't end up with any little parachuters of your own. Anyway... we move on to our first trans story of the day, Leo, and everyone's favourite Starbucker turns out to be a serial offender.
Yeah, so the Starbucks manager sacked for ranting at a woman she accused of transphobia is apparently an outspoken trans activist whose neighbours are terrified of offending by mistakenly saying the wrong thing. So neighbours said, Luna, that's the name of the Starbucks.
That's a brave name to adopt, isn't it?
Yeah. Luna, second name Tick.
Yeah.
But she or he or whatever you're supposed to say has a partner, and they seem a nice enough couple, but don't say a lot to us. Nobody around here has a problem with her sexuality, but people are quite scared of offending her if they say the wrong thing. You saw what happened in the Starbucks, and people don't want that happening to them. Sometimes you can get your genders mixed up as it's become quite a complicated world. Let's just say Luna is quite a unique person. Very diplomatically put.
There are some photographs of her, if you want to have a look in the Daily Mail. I don't think we can get any up, but, I mean, she really does look like an absolute fruitcake. It's like...
Don't mess about. I have to say, every time I read these kind of things, I'm so grateful for all the times my brother and I fought and he knocked it out of me as a kid. Because you kind of learn a bit of emotional regulation, don't you, I think, as a child?
Well, there's a very good book called The Coddling of the American Mind. Do you know that book? Jonathan Haidt, and Greg Lukianoff. And it's about various factors that have led to the mental health crisis of sort of 18 to 25-year-olds. And that is one of the main ones he says. A lot of middle-class kids in particular now are only children. I talk about this in my show because I'm an only child, and, you know, it was always a bit of a prejudice against me growing up, but, you know, those were the days before you were spoilt. But, yes, large families, the more siblings you have,
well,
the less likely you are to grow up with these ridiculous ideas about yourself, you know.
They mentioned that Luna's house, parents' house, was quite a nice house. I thought, is that a little nod to a privileged background? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's very easy to make sweeping generalisations, but I'm quite happy to do so. Parents, teach your kids right from wrong. The Times now, shady going on in Scotland, Cressida, and for once it's nothing to do with wee Nicola, as far as we know.
It's not, so far. BAE Systems investigates sabotage on HMS Glasgow. So Europe's biggest defence contractor has opened an investigation because there's been an incident where 60 cables have been severed, and they think it might be a disgruntled contractor who they haven't paid. Well, that seems like a reasonable place to start.
Do they have one they haven't paid? Because that would be...
That's the implication, isn't it? That would be my first check.
It's bad enough when you go a week after a gig without a payment, isn't it? You start to think, what can I want to put the word about?
I can think of some bookers I'd like to sabotage their cables. So...
that sounds like another trans joke you made there.
It's like Tommy Lee and Pamela's sex tape. That's how it was a disgruntled.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the Stand there or something. No, there's Tommy.
They probably employ. Well, the Stand employed
they probably put on a benefit night for the fellow who sabotaged the HMS Glasgow. It's called, which is. I mean, just remembering how that fellow was treated at Glasgow Airport, tried to blow it up a few years ago. Remember that, and just kicked almost to death while he was on fire.
Yeah.
You've got to be a brave man to sneak onto HMS Glasgow and start cutting its cables, haven't you? That seems...
Yeah, so he must have had access somehow. Or it could have been, some kind of... I know Britain's Trident and submarines and all the rest of it aren't popular with the far left. It could have been, one of the far left activists, or it could have been a Russian agent, although they're generally not that organised to do something that well.
Well, they would somehow... It would be some kind of a psychological operation on a local who would be mind-washed, or whatever the term is, brainwashed into doing this.
It's very difficult to brainwash Scottish people.
Don't go any further.
Don't have enough brain.
Over to The Guardian now, Leo. No surprise to find one of their favourite writers is after our crown jewels, but not on this occasion a feminist.
So a leading writer, Narendra Modi, on the British Empire has said that it is inevitable that Indian jewels and historical artefacts looted under colonial rule will be returned amid reports that the country will begin a campaign to get them repatriated. So he's talking about the Koh-i-Noor diamond, amongst others. I think it's set in... Isn't it one of the royal stones? It's in the sceptre or the...
I've seen it in the Tower of London,
They avoided using it recently because of all this, didn't they? They could have used it, but they didn't.
It is quite... I mean, it's a very interesting story. I'm not going to be, boorishly patriotic about this, but I will say the Koh-i-Noor was not, held by the Indian royal family for hundreds of years or something. It's been changing hands and dynasties. It was captured by the Mughal emperors, I think. It was in Persia for a while. It may even be of Persian origin, I think, rather than Indian origin. It's not a simple, straightforward, we went over to India and nicked it kind of thing. These things
so what you're saying is they should chop it up into pieces, distribute it
in
equally, and then everyone can just calm down. That'll work.
Well, they're saying even now there's multiple claims on its ownership. So if it goes to the Hindus in India, then the Sikhs will get upset. If it goes to the Sikhs, then the Hindu nationals will be upset. And we've seen what's happened with... Germany had Benin bronzes and they went back and were immediately just half-inched and put in somebody's private collection and not given back to the public.
Well, that's an important point, isn't it? How these things get looked after. I don't know what the cost of conservation is, but it must be massive to look after.
There's at least the cost of it, and then there is also... And I'm not saying that this is, a slam-dunk argument, but there is also the degree of political instability some of these places have had. I mean, I'm not saying, again, that it would have happened in Greece, for instance, that they would necessarily have lost the Elgin Marbles. But we saw what happened quite recently in Palmyra.
Yeah.
When ISIS got in there. If that had all been shipped wholesale over to the British Museum a couple of hundred years ago, there would have been much less fuss about that. I'm just saying.
Let's put some paratroopers in Sudanese museums.
Yeah. I think it's I kind of feel diamonds are a weird... I mean, it is a huge thing, but they do feel a bit archaic now anyway as a store of value or interest anyway, aren't they? I mean, they're so easily replicated to all intents and purposes.
I don't think
by
the big
a 3D
ones,
printer.
If it's Koh-i-Noor, I don't think you can make a Koh-i-Noor one in a microwave.
You can, absolutely. In a microwave. Like when you scrunch up tin foil and put that in the microwave and it comes out all shiny.
That's how you make it. Try it at home in the break.
Wonderful, that. That is section 2 in the bag. Join us in a couple of minutes for part 3. We have dismantling Merkel's legacy, leveraging Trump's liabilities and draining the Floridian swamp. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. So, Cressida, the Telegraph has news of Germany's latest attempts to undo all the damage done by the most fated female leader of my lifetime.
Well, it says here, Germany to ditch Angela Merkel's open-door migrant policy. So current German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is planning to ditch the liberal refugee policy of the past. Local governments in Germany are complaining they can't cope because they don't have the funds. He doesn't want to give them any money, so he's planning to tighten up the borders. And he's got support from the Green Party, the Greens, who are saying they need to know who's in the country. And he's got this amazing phrase, I love this, a new type of immigration partnership, which is basically like a doorman at a nightclub saying one in, one out. They'll exchange people they want for people that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Oh, OK.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting way of doing it. And the Greens are on side, are they? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what sort of coalition they've got there, to be honest.
Well, I think they've seen. I mean, the AfD are slightly more right wing than other parties in Germany. Have been.
They're not in the coalition, though, are they?
No, but they've been making gains. They've seen what's happened in Italy, what's happened in Sweden, what could possibly happen in the UK. So they've seen that having uncontrolled immigration can lead to populist, more right wing parties coming in displacing the incumbents.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess this is a way of slowing down the immigration, also making it more culturally integratable. So they're going to sort of cherry pick qualified migrants, so doctors and people like that, who are obviously going to come here. We won't see scenes like, I mean, we've seen Middle Eastern immigrants doing Sikh Heils and stuff because they're anti-Semitic and they see Hitler as a hero, which obviously is doesn't mesh well with modern
Hitler's
Germany.
reputation in other parts of the world can be very surprising at times. There are various countries where he is used to market like tobacco and wine and things. It's quite bizarre. And there's still a strong strain of pro-National Socialist reading and discussion within Hindu nationalism in India.
Interesting.
They have no problem at all with like looking at his the philosophers of the Third Reich and so on and using that as a template for anyway. But that's not all the same thing, of course. Germany does have a record of a good degree of success with this stuff. I think because they have very strong institutions and they have a high degree of expectation of a certain appropriate behaviour and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I think some Germans would disagree. There was I watched a BBC documentary about Germans moving to South America because they wanted to be. They could see what was happening with Germany and
also they might have thought they could take it over.
No, maybe the granddad lived there he left during the war, the boys from Brazil and all that.
Absolutely. Well, staying with the Telegraph, Leo, talking of Germany's nemesis, Donald Trump has spotted an unusual fundraising angle.
So Donald Trump's team plans to use his sexual abuse verdict to boost his campaign war chest, painting the 2024 Republican frontrunner as the victim of a political smear campaign. There's literally nothing you can do to Donald Trump that will bring him down. He's like the Terminator. You know when the other somebody punched the Terminator in the chest and he just turned his chest into a fist and grabbed their hand. He's like that.
If you strike me down, I shall come back.
Stronger than you could possibly imagine. I mean, previously when he was criminally charged over hush money payments, he raised more than $12 million off the back of that, which covered all his fees and all the anything he had to pay.
And this recent case has played totally into his hands because it's a civil case. It wasn't a slam dunk by any means.
It was very obviously put together to try and bring him down. They had to change the law. They had to they had to change the law to attack him. It's like
and the case against him was just a gift to him to represent in the way that he wanted. That he'd this woman come into a dressing room with. I mean, when you hear him talk about it, you just kind of go, yeah, it does sound a bit.
He's becoming quite funny, isn't he? I keep watching him lately.
Oh, he's always been funny. That's the danger with.
Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm just starting to get drawn in. I think he's funny. He's like a stand-up.
He is. But this is the irony. It's hilarious how 99% of British stand-ups absolutely hate and loathe and detest him and see him as the end of. And you're like, he's funny.
Yeah,
that's
funny.
You've got to recognise that. Otherwise you end up looking fun.
He's brutal. He's callous and brutal and says the things. You can see in the audience at the CNN town hall. Everybody in the audience was like, "Oh, did he say that?"
You're a nasty woman.
But they loved it. They loved it. I mean, I think it's amazing. And I think American voters are just thinking, how many times have we got to vote this guy into the presidency before you get the message? We don't want all this woke nonsense. We don't want, children being transitioned. We don't want, everybody telling white people they're evil.
The only sort of caveat to that, and I think it will probably be him versus Biden again, which is incredible, but I do think he is a liability. Partly because I think, to be honest, it was like the Roe v. Wade thing, funnily enough, in the midterms, wasn't it? That actually activated such a significant bloc vote within the Democrats. It's all a question of getting the vote out. It's how motivated the bottom third are always. That's the problem. That's why the postal vote was so significant, because it gave the vote to people who are not normally motivated enough to visit their local polling station. I mean, quite seriously, it wasn't a fix, but it produced a very different result than you would have expected.
But if the Republicans,
if
the Republicans get more organised and manage to, utilise, they didn't use postal votes so much last time. So if they use that this time.
All I mean is Trump he brings out his base, but he absolutely brings out the people who hate him as well, you know. But could be the biggest turnout in history. Anyway, Cressida, The Guardian now, with the latest from the ongoing battle between Disney and DeSantis, Trump's possible nemesis in the nomination race.
Quite possibly. Florida teacher allegedly investigated for showing students film Strange World. Did you know about Strange World?
Only for a couple of hours.
You've seen it? Well, you're a parent. Is that what? I hadn't seen it, so I watched a clip. I watched the trailer to see what is this filth, and it's not. That's not the issue. It's not filthy.
No, you got to watch the whole.
Well,
film.
it says here the film involves a group of explorers who are trying to save a mysterious land from losing its vital energy source.
Yeah, that's not the issue with it.
Oh, isn't it?
Is it very gay? I mean, it's like there's a gay character. Is that the problem?
Yeah, but it's really laid on so thick and so. It's like a public service announcement film.
Okay.
They don't even. It's not like they have a. It's not like an incidental thing or somebody just happens to be gay. It's like oh, this character is gay and that means it's good and you should. It's really sort of laid on so thick.
Because I watched the trailer as well just this evening to get up to speed, and I couldn't even have told you which one was gay, to be honest, from the trailer. I mean, they've really buried with that.
It's so weird and clunky when you watch the actual film.
Yeah.
And it's just, and it doesn't.
I do wonder with this. I mean, my children are 15 and 18 now. My daughter used to watch all the Pixar movies, all the Disney movies, absolutely, religiously all the time. And I do think it probably did affect her worldview. My son, on the other hand, didn't give a damn about any of them. Never. He was like just wanted to play his guitar. But there is, a point at which their worldview is like formed by that to some extent, and then they come out of it at the other end. And I do think it's possible to get a little bit, unhealthily obsessed with. I think they probably are unhealthily obsessed with trying to create propaganda, but I don't know that it's that effective.
But I think because it was obviously created propaganda, it was like that message was in there to be a message. It wasn't just an
but he's still on dodgy ground because he got a consent form. So, sorry, the teacher, she got a consent form. So there's no argument here.
No.
I mean,
it's a tiny, tiny story anyway. I think they've just possibly... it's a bit like that thing where a few years ago they started to have more often you would have a black actor, black lead character in a movie, just like a proper live-action grown-up movie. But there was definitely a period when there were more significant characters were black, but they were always good.
Yeah.
They could never be the bad. They could never be duplicitous, double-crossing, treacherous, or disloyal.
Like women in real life.
It's like
and now you're starting to get to that point where actually, just because he's black, he still might be a wrong 'un.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's because you've got to go through that period where there's always going to be that. Otherwise,
but for that period, it made it. There was no jeopardy in films. You knew who the goodies and the baddies were. There wasn't going to be a twist at the end. But honestly, Strange World. I got no problem with gay people in films or whatever. Obviously. Yeah. But I'd rather show my kid a Derek Jarman film or something that's properly gay than this weird propaganda.
Mirror now, Leo. And a chap who is on extended leave doesn't say what for, but it sounds like a lot. It could be enormously enlarged testicles.
So, a worker sues his company for no pay rise in 15 years, but he's been on sick leave the whole time. And he's paid a lot of money. He's an IT specialist, Ian Clifford, who receives over 54 grand a year. But he claims he's the victim of disability discrimination because his salary hasn't been increased in the 15 years he's been off work. So he works for IBM, or he worked for a company that was bought by IBM. I mean, this is obviously 15 years ago.
Yeah.
IBM have...
Back in the days of mainframe.
Yeah, I want to get a job for IBM. This sounds amazing, because it means statutory sick pay, I think, after 6 months or something.
And
kicks in, but they're still paying his full salary. He's saying it should increment up each year.
And it doesn't even say what he's off with, does it? I couldn't find out at all.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't say what he's off with. Excessive moaning? I don't know.
I wonder if it is one of those kind of chronic fatigue syndrome type jobs or something where they're just going to go, get rid of him. I don't want him in the office.
It's an important missing detail, isn't it?
It does seem to be. Anyway, listen, we're running out of time. That's my fault, but we've got 3 sections down, 1 to go. Final section includes fat shaming, pop stars behaving badly. Fast shaming is an interesting idea. And what do you get for the man who has everything? Therapy, it turns out. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners for our final section. So, dental news, Leo, in the Daily Mail, and this bloke didn't even get as far as being shamed about the state of his gums.
Yeah, which were probably in a terrible state by the sounds of them. So, a former pub landlord has been left insulted after he was turned away from his dental surgery last week because his 22-stone weight meant he was too fat for the chair. But I mean, on the other hand, if his teeth go bad, he won't be able to chew as much food, so the pounds will drop off and he can go back and get his teeth fixed. But yeah, he's been a regular patient there for a decade, but claims the surgery then told him he wouldn't be able to come back because of the way he spoke to staff in retaliation. So it sounds like he kicked off when they said, listen, you're too big for the chair.
But then if he's too big for the chair, he's too big for the chair, so it's irrelevant, right?
Well, he's saying otherwise, isn't he? He's saying, he's saying he hasn't changed weight in 10 years. Well, we've all said that to ourselves, haven't we?
I didn't get small the chest.
Yeah, so he's got to go elsewhere. I mean, that's horrible.
They do have, it sounds like there are some dentists that have larger reinforced chairs, like one in every 5 surgeries or something has to have. But you would think, I don't know where this is, but in America, you know, the level of obesity now, it's nearly 50% or something. Of you know, I mean, they must have a built-in expectation. There must be larger outsized chairs.
Well, you've got to start building new stuff, otherwise it's go to the zoo, isn't it? If you don't...
Are you suggesting he go to the zoo?
I'm not, but I have seen stories about people that need scans where they are too large to use human equipment.
Wow.
Take them to the zoo and feed them to the lions.
That is terrible. Too large, too fat for the chair. It sounded very much like an execution story, that when I first read it. It's like he would fry. Staying with fat shaming now, Cressida, though actually in error. This is in the Express and a robust approach from Ryanair's Twitter account.
Yes. Ryanair responds to critics after being accused of fat-shaming passenger. But they claim that they weren't.
Yeah.
This guy was complaining about the fact that he didn't have a window seat. And as they like to say, we sell seats, not windows.
Yeah.
Somehow there was a photo of him. He took a photo of himself with a fisheye lens. It made him look bigger than he was.
Yeah.
And knowing that, they tweeted back, pay for the baggage you've stored under your jumper and we can talk.
Which I think is quite funny.
Yeah.
It's a bit of fun, isn't it?
I've got to say, it's all upside down. Ryanair, it's a terrible airline. It's unreliable. It's horrific putting up with all their sales pitches every 5 minutes. But their Twitter account's quite funny.
Yeah, it's a lot like Donald Trump.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't actually do that great a job.
You get that?
Hugely entertaining.
Same colour.
Absolutely. Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with corporate Twitter accounts, like, you know, being robust as well. When people are whining. Exactly, yeah. It's changed from that usual shut-up brand thing with the laser eyes. So we're on Team Ryanair for this one. Pop star news in the Daily Mail. This stays on in terms of avionics. The Queen may be dead, but Morrissey is still alive and well and capable of full-throttle diva behaviour, by the sound of it.
So Big Mouth strikes again. Morrissey is filmed from his BA business class seat, demanding to be let off the plane that was grounded due to stormy weather. So his flight from London Heathrow to Dublin was diverted to Shannon, where my in-laws live, where it sat in the tarmac for almost 2 hours, and he demanded to be let off. I think, you know, he didn't realise it's not a bus. open the door and wander off the plane. There's quite a steep drop to the ground. But yeah, I mean, I know I love Morrissey. He must be getting on a bit now, but he's still kicking off. Somebody who's on the plane said he'd been necking gin and tonics. And so he's acting like a bit of a rock star. One of the few people in music who still acts like a rock star.
I completely agree. Imagine if you'd seen Morrissey and he hadn't done this.
Yeah.
How disappointing. You wouldn't be sure if it was him, would you?
No, I quite agree with you. He's remained very true to his principles.
His music gets better, and so does politics.
It is incredibly infuriating when a transit vehicle does that. It's like when trains, they pull in to a station and they're being held at a red... and then they sit there for an hour and you get no information and they will not let you out.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there may be reasons, but there's part of your brain that just short-circuits in that. Well, I don't quite have the rock star, profile.
Take some gin and tonics with you.
Do you know who I am? Papal bull now, Cressida and the Express have the Pope reminiscing of a time when he came perilously close to fallibility.
I love this. Pope Francis' furious outburst as he loses patience with woman who wanted her dog blessed. So a woman asked him to bless her baby, and he went to bless it, and it was a dog. I think that's hilarious.
I hope he swore.
Well, I think this is really funny. This comes following sobering demographic projections in Italy. Basically, nobody's having babies anymore. Everybody's having dogs.
Oh, he thinks it was that, does he?
Well, he says that this is selfish behaviour.
Yeah. It's not really like for like, though, is it? It's not like she went, what are you having, a boy or a girl? No, I'm having a dog. I mean, it's like...
And also he's recommended, I think, to European countries, including Italy, to increase immigration to make up for the demographic decline. But the demographic decline is because people can't afford a house. Yeah. People generally want to own a house before they have a baby because you want to have that security.
Is that true in Italy as well?
I think it's true everywhere. I mean, that's certainly what put me off having kids. And until I realised, man, you can just have kids and rent.
You really can. And they can sleep in drawers, in chests of drawers and things like that. They don't need beds.
But if you bring, totally.
When I got my boat, the guy told me there used to be one hanging in a hammock from the ceiling.
Anyway, we've got time for one more story just before the break now, Leo. It sounds like yet another new kind of victim to feel sorry for. Let's squeeze that in.
So, apparently, if you win the lottery, there's a big chance that you're going to go bankrupt, lose all your money, and end up with less money than you had beforehand. And people don't know what to do with the money. So, this guy's got some top tips, which will be of interest to about 3 people a year, I should imagine, because there's not that many lottery winners. But he says, don't share your good news with too many people. You know, people will treat you differently.
I wouldn't share it with anyone at all. I certainly wouldn't tell my wife. I certainly would not tell my kids. I mean, I have fantasised about it, and I would definitely not tell anyone. Because then you can be generous with your friends and just kind of go, oh, I had a bit of good luck, and they'll think you're a great guy.
Yeah.
Whereas you could never spend enough on people. Once they know you've got millions.
That's the thing. He says, don't overpromise on gifts. So somebody won $1 million, promised 800 grand's worth, and then their financial manager says, well, you don't have enough money to retire now. So.
Oh, tragic. Anyway, listen, the show is nearly over. Sorry you didn't get a word in on that one, Cressida, but you did well generally, so I'm not feeling that sorry for you. The show is nearly over. Let's take a quick look at Sunday's front pages one last time. The Mail on Sunday, Kate's Eurovision tribute to Ukraine. I don't even know who won. The Sunday Telegraph, Labour to give EU citizens the right to vote if they win the next election. Sunday Mirror, I'm a celeb, saved me from cancer. We didn't cover that story. I'm intrigued. The Sunday Times, nursing union chief in U-turn over pay deal, the wrong direction. Sunday Express, Rishi's vow, I won't budge. And finally, the Daily Star Sunday, wacky X Factor star Wagner. I'm going to make a fortune flogging pics of myself playing bongos in the buff. Those were your front pages. That's all we have time for. Thank you to Leo Kirst and Cressida Wetton. Tomorrow night, I'll be joined by Steve N. Allen and Francis Foster. See you there. Good night.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to. by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need because when the establishment